Hello, my friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family. Thank you guys for joining me. So, there's a lot of things in here that at first may not look to be related at first glance, but perhaps are extremely related and part of the bigger picture. And when we start putting all these little pieces together, we start to get a clearer vision of, who are we? Where do we come from? Where can we possibly go? And so we see the question, who was Methuselah, a man who lived for 969 years, according to the Bible? Well, when you look at the biblical tales, there were quite a few that lived extremely long lives, hundreds of years, 800, 900 years. And then, God says at some point in time that he's not going to strive with man forever, for he is just mortal, and so his years shall be not any more than 120. So it's interesting. It's interesting when we look at that, yet we see these patriarchs, these, ancient beings of legend, and, did they really live that long? So Methuselah was Noah's grandfather, so he's considered from biblical text to be the man with one of the longest lifespans in history. Is said to live for 969 years until the great flood swept across the land. Interesting, too, because after the flood, lifespans go down. Now, when we look over to the Vedas and we see the yugas, which are different ages, the Satya Yuga, which is like a golden age. And many believe this has to do with consciousness, really consciousness, and what we would call densities. Like we live in 3D, and perhaps when we are sleeping, we're in 4D. Perhaps when the golden age was upon us, we were either in 5D or 6D. It's all about consciousness. So the Satya Yuga, the golden age, the average human lifespan was 100,000 years old. So, some scholars have said, well, that's just allegory. It wasn't literal. It wasn't serious. And then we see in the Treta Yuga, the average lifespan was 10,000 years. The Dwapar Yuga, it was 1,000 years. And in this Dark Age, the Kali Yuga, it's 100 years. And it's going to keep decreasing, as we have gone through this Kali Yuga, this Dark Age. But we are actually leaving this Kali Yuga now, interestingly enough. And we have a lot of different things going on, including the thought that there perhaps are mutations going on now that happen at these time periods when science tells us that we lose our shields. When the magnetosphere declines, we do know for a fact cosmic radiation is let in ever-increasing intensity. Cosmic radiation, scientists will tell you, can cause mutations, deviations from the norm. We also see when we look at the Sumerian kings list, so there are 8 kings that reigned before a great flood. After the flood, various city-states and their dynasties of kings temporarily gained powers over others. There was constant worship going on between them, and the gods themselves lived with man. The gods actually ruled over man, and man was actually, they were the slaves of the gods when you get down to it. After kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was in Eridug. And Eridug, Alulim, became king. He ruled for 28,800 years. Wow. And then you have Alajar ruled for 36,000 years. 2 kings. They ruled for 64,800 years. So you have 8 kings with a total of 241,200 years from the time when kingship, quote-unquote, descended from heaven with the Anunnaki. Now, after the flood swept over the land, then kingship was lowered from heaven again. And actually, if you read through the Sumerian texts, they knew it was coming, whatever it was that came. And many believe this is what happened at the Younger Dryas period that really caused the devastation, whether it was an asteroid, whether it was a weapon that the Anunnaki shot at the earth, perhaps. Enlil wanted to be done with humanity. Enki saved 1 or 2. And there you go. We went inside the earth according to many legends, and we survived as a species, although our lifespan was greatly reduced. And it's interesting to see that these are in agreement. So you have the Sumerian kings list, you have the biblical texts, and we also have the Vedic tradition all saying the same thing, that humans lived a very long time in the past, and that we have lived less as we've gone into this age. Genesis 3:22, we'll start on 3:21, 3:22. This says, this is all about, the old eating the apple there, Adam and Eve, and we do know that Adam, again, the biblical stories come from the Sumerian stories, which predate them by thousands of years, and also some of it comes from an Egyptian tradition as well. And so it says, then the Lord God said, behold, the man has become like one of us. And that is how it translates, one of us, knowing both good and evil. And now, lest he reach out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever. So then the Lord God banished him from the Garden of Eden to work the ground from which he had been taken. And he's going to toil and sweat, and that's it. And so here we see from a Sumerian text, Anu, who is the king of the gods. Anu is over Enlil and Enki. And he visits Earth here and there. I think he visited it several times. I'm not sure the exact number of times. But in general, Anu is up there, and he's not ruling directly over Earth. Enlil does, and Enki has his own plans as well. Those two are always in conflict, as we know. So Anu, impressed by Adapa's sincerity, and Adapa is like your early human. It's the first human there, basically, offered instead the food of immortality. But Adapa heeded Enki's advice, because Enki had told him don't accept it, and he refused, and thus missed the chance for immortality that would have been his, and man would have been like the gods. Interesting. So Enki is the hero in one sense, in that he does salvage humanity, but at the same time, here, humanity could have rose and become one of the gods. And Enki basically tricked Adapa, you could say, into not accepting immortality and being one of the gods fully. Interesting, is that not? See, the problem is that so many people have only been brought up on the biblical tradition, and they don't see the whole picture, because there's been so much revisionism and so much that has been cut out. There's so few books included as opposed to what was out and about. Literally hundreds of gospels, and there's only 4, and there's been many revisions. We've seen hundreds of revisions in just a single text alone that people are not aware of. So here you see the gods, and you see men, humans, basically just locked away here as in a jail of sorts, or in a cell of sorts, or in a jar almost of sorts. So not a pleasant picture. And here we see humans being strung along, chained together as slaves. And this is pretty clear. Again, we see the giant Anunnaki, who are very human-like here, just much larger than humans. If we could guess, we'd probably say they're about 12 feet tall, 14 feet tall, I guess. As this guy is kneeling, maybe he's almost coming up to the waist if he was to stand up. So interesting that we see time and time again. And there was one more, this one here. And this is actually a really large carving. And again, you could see they're all joined at the neck. And clearly, these other beings are much larger beings, much larger than the rest of the humans. They are giants, are they not? But yet they are human. And yet there is a flying disc. And they also watch from the heavens, which are up in the sky. Anything that's not on earth and is up there is the heavens. And that's, part of understanding interpretations. Yeah, there are different dimensions as well. But clearly, this is a physical interaction. Physical. And so we see over here also some symbolism. Entwined serpent symbol given to Enki's son, Ningishita. Ningishita and Enki. And Ningishita, many believe, is Thoth is Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent of Mesopotamia as well. Interesting that we see the Egyptian Ankh here as well, and which is a form of the cross. And here clearly, again, we see the intertwined serpents. So when we start putting all these things together, we're talking about the tree of life. Well, what's the tree of life? Well, this is the tree of life in Kabbalah. This is what it looks like. And we can see the representation of the different chakras on the tree of life. The 7 gates on the Kabbalah tree of life align with the chakras. It's interesting, in Chinese mythology, humans one time were just like the gods. We were just like the gods. And the gods blocked our abilities by blocking our chakras, by putting gates in between the chakras, so that the energy wouldn't flow up the spine directly. Because when it does flow up the spine, that's called the Kundalini energy, and what happens? Well, it awakens the third eye, opens the crown chakra, connects us to the higher dimensions, and allows us to be as the gods. And of course, the gods could not have that because they needed to use us to work the planet as slaves while they're doing their things. Perhaps they're still up there watching us. Perhaps they are still doing their things as long as everything goes along as planned, and as long as humans are maintaining their status as slaves and not trying to be like the gods. This is a representation of the Ida and the Pingala and the Sushumna. So the Sushumna is the central channel through which the Kundalini energy flows when the masculine and the feminine energies are balanced. So the Ida and the Pingala, the 2 snakes here, the white and the dark, are representing the masculine and the feminine energies. Part of the reason why we have such a dominant patriarchal system is because it naturally throws us out of balance. We are taught to think with the left brain, not to use intuition with the right brain. This is all part of the system that keeps us out of balance and keeps us locked down into a lower frame of mind. This is also done through the use of fear tactics, and fear is very, very lowering of vibration, and thus we're kept in perpetual fear. Being brought up Catholic, it was all about hellfire and damnation if you don't do exactly as you are told. And of course, that's going to be a limiting belief system that's going to keep you in a lower vibrational frequency, which is the frequency and the mindset of a slave. And so we need to recognize that. There's 2 basic, very, very different philosophies ongoing on the planet when we break it down. There is that which we've been taught, which is basically be a good little slave, don't question anything. Just do as you're told, don't question authority. And, unfortunately, that hasn't led to a good place. And then there's also the other side, which, says that the divine, that God and source lies in every creature, and it's just a matter of going within. Going within doesn't lend well to maintaining slavery and a slavish mindset of the populace. So we could see the symbolism here clearly. So the Tree of Life is talking all about chakras and Kundalini energy, and it's all about enlightening humanity and reactivating things that were active in the Satya Yuga, where humans lived 100,000 years according to the Vedic tradition, and also back when the Sumerian kings lists were telling us that kings were reigning for 20, 30, 40,000 years, because humans were much more then than we are now. Then again, we've seen the tactics used by the leaders today, as Hitler put fluoride in the water to keep people docile. And so we see, that we've had fluoride in our water. We've seen all the different things that have been used against us to keep our frequencies low, including now FIVE, G, which is attacking us in many ways, but other frequencies as well. Every single day, there's frequencies that are attacking us and trying to keep us in a slave mindset. And here we see the all-seeing eye of Ra, or Horus. And what is it? Well, it's representing the pineal gland over on the right. Isn't it interesting how that's exactly what that looks like? Exactly. This is an actual pineal gland. And you could see this is what it's pointing to. For freedom, true freedom, from this dimension and from the slavery of this dimension only comes when you are fully awakened. And when you could connect to the higher realms yourself. It doesn't come by saying any sort of words. It doesn't come by any particular act. It comes from hours and hours of deep meditation and understanding how to activate the life-changing Kundalini energy, which is known as the evolutionary energy that's within men and women, of course. The eye of Horus Falcon, you could see the clear representations. You see the thalamus, you see the third eye, the inner bird. So when you know Horus, of course, you have Isis, which is the mother goddess. See, this is a trinity. This is a trinity that is more balanced in the sense that you have the mother, Isis, you have the father, Osiris, who is also a dying and resurrection god. And Osiris, dies, and then Horus becomes basically the head of the pantheon. The sun takes over. So you could see the symbology there. And also see the actual symbology of the inner bird as well here with the all-seeing eye. And so again, Christ taught parables to the masses because that's all they could understand for the most part. And a lot of people were not going to get it, especially back in those days with as little education as there was. Although there were great libraries that were destroyed, such as the Library of Alexandria, which held so much of this type of knowledge, which the powers that be destroyed. So the light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. Yes, and that's all about awakening the pineal gland. That's what that is about. And when you do it, you see light. And Cindy has experienced the light many times, and she's watched me when doing my meditation and drawing energy in on purpose. And what did you see today when I was doing my standing meditation?
You had a difference between your right hemisphere and left hemisphere. It's like the left hemisphere, I saw actually this huge blue orb next to it, and the right hemisphere looked like it was sending and receiving information. And then I could also see, like around the crown, a lot of these little dots, whereas like your brain synapsing, it got quite busy up there.
And you could see that as I was going deeper and deeper in, the energy was getting stronger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely gets stronger. I see that with other clients too. When we see them on the phone, I can watch their energy expand. It's really kind of cool.
And how about the feet? What do you notice with the feet?
The feet look like you were standing on two white plates, and then like the light was transferring information back and forth.
It's amazing what can be done through meditation, proper meditation, QiGong, and tools like mantras. We know that we have been altered. Human chromosome 2 is a fusion of two ancestral chromosomes. There's all sorts of indication that humanity was something different. We were something different. And now with the technology that we have now, like CRISPR, we're understanding that, what is possible. The other thing that came up to Cindy was something that I've known for a while but never really talked to her about. It's just the fact that DNA is more than physical. DNA extends into the etheric and the astral and out into the emotional and the various spiritual bodies as well.
Yeah, so that makes sense to me because there's information. DNA is like information, so it's on the biofield of the body too. Exactly.
And here you see a second leaky splice site mutation in the spastin gene. One thing that science will do is they will tend to label things. a certain way, so as to often dissuade people from understanding why, why would we have a fused chromosome, for instance, with chromosome number 2. And aging is all about the length of your telomeres as well. So if you could slow down the deterioration of the telomeres, you'll slow down the aging process. Is it possible to even reverse it? Well, theoretically it is. Ancient ancestors had more DNA than we do now. Have we devolved? Or more to the question, has somebody done some snipping? Has somebody deactivated vast areas of our DNA? If you look at the Sumerian records, humans were created to be a slave race by the Anunnaki. But perhaps humans, were more than they were after the Anunnaki intervention. Maybe we were more before than after. So maybe there's a missing part of that story as well. So it's interesting to look at this, and this is out of Ancient Origins, which has a lot of good info. So a study published this week, and this is back in 2015, in Science has found that modern humans lost DNA as we evolved after our split from the apes, quote unquote. And there's a lot of basically, misinfo in there as well. As we know, Charles Darwin was a 33rd degree Mason. So evolution does happen, but there again, where they'll give us a little truth, but then they'll also get us thinking and looking in the wrong direction, and usually in a way in which it makes us feel less about ourselves, or things are random, and it's always a way to limit our scope. So why do we lose all this genetic information? And so the answer is we don't know. But, for some reason, Homo sapiens have shed approximately 40.7 million base pairs of DNA after breaking out from our closest relatives, chimpanzees, about 13 million years ago. So they say. There again, we got to recognize that places like the Smithsonian have buried so much of the truth in ocean beds and who knows where else. As also, if we could just open up the Vatican and go and see what's down there below, that would be very, very interesting to see what they've hidden away as well. Stable triple-stranded DNA formation, its application to SNP detection. So this is also getting into differences in genes and DNA and how we can manipulate them, how we perhaps have been manipulated, as they're trying to figure out. I mean, they don't know, because your mainstream is not going to look at things like the Sumerian writings and look for clues, that point towards some sort of genetic intervention. They won't put the whole thing together, taking the mythos and looking for clues in the myths and the legends and mixing it with what they're finding scientifically. Harvard scientists studied the DNA of white people and found something truly surprising, that really, we are hybrids. We're all hybrids, whether, no matter what race we come from, we're all hybrids, and we are all kind of sharing this DNA. But perhaps, there have been many different types of humanoid beings on this planet, and many different types mating and being able to mate and create offspring. Even though when we look at the Sumerian writings and we look at the depictions, it's as if they're creating humans in test tubes and then impregnating the goddesses with them. That's what it looks like, and that's what the story says. It's very interesting. Having more than one set of DNA carries a legacy of risk. So yeah, there's a rare genetic disorder called Smith-Magenis syndrome, where they have more than a typical set of DNA. Interesting. And this is a little PDF on that syndrome. Cindy and I had talked before about people that perhaps had multiple personality disorder. So what was that really? Perhaps they're actually people that in many cases are able to communicate with the dead. Maybe they're what we would call mediums, or something of the like. And perhaps the multiple personalities are disembodied beings trying to jump into this person's body or speaking to them directly. And because, they have abilities, gifts that might seem like a curse, they get a different scientific label, and then they get put away somewhere where they're going to be drugged up until the end of time. And perhaps a lot of people in the know actually understand these things, and this is how they control the people that have these gifts.
Oh, indeed, I was controlled. I never considered it a gift. It was, no, they drugged me for, probably at least 10 years, probably stretched out to 20 years, did their best to keep me quiet and tell me that my brain was wrong and I was wrong and everything about me. And they even told me how to manage this information that came to me and what should properly be done with it. So, yeah.
But we've seen a strong effort by the powers that be to wipe out anybody that has these type of gifts. If we look at the witch hunts and stuff, a lot of people that were killed were just people that knew herbal medicine and had different ways. People that were pagans, those of the hearth, those that were in tune with nature. And, of course, the persecution was atrocious. We've seen the Inquisition. We've seen what's happened to the natives in both North and South Americas as well. And they also had legends about these beings from elsewhere that have come here. So everything has been stamped out at every opportunity, or it's been labeled something so that people can be controlled through these mind-altering substances, and again, keep us in a limited frame of mind and with limited insight. Here you see the Daily Telegraph: brave toddler Alfie Clamp stuns doctors after being born with extra strand of DNA. So this is a condition so rare, doctors don't even know its name. Yet channeled material back in the 80s and 90s was talking about this is going to happen. And more kids are going to be born with more and more active DNA. Because, again, we are in a time period where we have a magnetic pole reversal, we have a grand solar minimum going on, our shields are down, the magnetosphere is down, more cosmic radiation is coming in. We even know that there's actually more cosmic radiation coming to us right now in this time frame. We also have heard of a galactic superwave because there's energy coming to us that is actually changing stars, literally changing stars as it hits them. And so this energy is hitting us in a wave, and this is why this age is ending, and this is why we are going to be going back into a higher density of being. And so this is to be expected, and of course it's going to be covered up in mass. Here you see 4-strand DNA structure found in cells, a newly discovered unusual nucleic acid structure. So it might have a role in regulating some genes. This is how Scientific American. Strange but true, one person born with 2 sets of DNA, a chimera. Boy, we have a lot of legends of chimeras from mythology, don't we? People with double DNA, human chimeras. And of course, we, look in the mythology here, of all the different chimeras. Why? Why the chimeras? Was it perhaps a transition in another age again? Interesting. There's a lot of things, a lot of pieces to this puzzle. So what is 12-strand DNA activation? Complete guide. And activating the new DNA as a service to humanity for the inner awakening of each soul that lives on Earth. So it's really a very opportune and yet trying time that we live in, because everything is changing. Our consciousness is changing. We are changing. Society is going to change. Those that are still in control, that we don't see now openly, we see their minions, we see their human, completely Homo sapiens. Well, maybe they're more Homo capensis if you guys have done your research. But still, we see these ruling families who have been given kingship on earth from on high, controlling the earth still. But yet, we're going to be going to a place they can't follow. And so this is what's happening with consciousness as our DNA is activated. You could speed your DNA activation through practices like QiGong and meditation and mantras. And it'll actually change your complete perception. And it'll change your ability to heal yourself as well as heal others. It's really amazing to undergo. So are we heading back to those days when people lived like Methuselah, 969 years, or like the Sumerian kings list, where they had kings that reigned for 20, 30, 40,000 years, or the Vedic periods, head back to the Satya Yuga, where people lived 100,000 years. Have we been genetically altered? And here we see scientists finally present evidence on expanding DNA strands. And, we've heard that as much as 90-something%, 93 to 97% of our DNA is junk. That's not true. It's been deactivated. It's operating on different dimensions and needs to become fully activated again. And I've been binging Robert Seffer a lot lately. He's very, very interesting, very good, an anthropologist, and talks a lot about human origins. If mankind evolved from the same African ancestor, then everybody's blood would be compatible, but it's not. Rhesus negative blood type, like rhesus monkey, right? Rhesus negative, in other words, not having that indicator from the rhesus, appears suddenly 35,000 years ago in Cro-Magnon. Where did the Rh negatives come from? Why does the body of an Rh negative mother carrying an Rh positive child try to reject her own offspring? Humanity isn't one race. It's a hybrid species. And very true. And, here you can see, and I've seen this before by others, talking about dogs. Look at the variety of dogs. Yet, they all theoretically can mate and have offsprings. Whether it's a Chihuahua, a Great Dane, a pug, a Shih Tzu, a Pit Bull, a Greyhound, a Wolf, whatever, they could all mate and have offsprings. They could even mate with foxes and wolves. We see a whole bunch of burros here. It's just about being very similar here. And so when we look at all the different races, we see some pygmy races that are very short, and yet we have Kareem Abdul-Jabbars. So we have a tremendous variety of skin types. We were told that, the people in Africa have darker skin because of the sun. Well, look at the same latitudes in South America. It's not the same. They don't look the same. How about going over to Australia? They look different as well. How about the people in the islands like Tonga? And no, it's not that. It's not that. We are hybrids, guys. We are hybrids. And we don't know the full story of this. We really, really don't. So what's interesting is Robert Seffer believes that Cro-Magnons came from Atlantis. And so that's the connection. He thinks that they are the Atlanteans. And so if you are Rh negative, you have Atlantean DNA and Atlantean blood in you. And so perhaps also Anunnaki. We could look at it in different terms here as well. Early humans slept around with more than just Neanderthals. So we're given this very monkeyish picture, which is probably completely reversed from the truth. And we now know that, Neanderthal DNA is in so many of us. So many of us, I think, mine's like 1 point something percent, 1.9, something like that. But it's not just Neanderthals, Denisovans as well. That's a newer one that we've learned about. And so Denisovans, may have been with us as recently as 30,000 years ago. Well, they're still kind of with us now because their DNA is in some of us as well, especially over in Asia. So really interesting. And, I think that it's purposeful in trying to depict Cro-Magnons, Denisovans, and Neanderthals as being, grunting cavemanish type of beings, when in fact, maybe the opposite is actually true. Denisovans and Neanderthals had larger skulls than we do. They actually had bigger brains than we do. Interesting, is it not? So we're told that, the size of a brain has something to do with intelligence and ability, cognitive abilities. Well, why are these quote unquote extinct ones that are no longer, here in and of by themselves? They're only part of our DNA now. Why did they disappear? What happened? And were they maybe, especially in terms of Cro-Magnon, maybe they were a lot more intelligent than we think. We find evidence of artifacts all across the globe showing, very highly evolved technology. But we also see that these intelligences that exhibit this much higher technology from years past are also, they seem to be way more in harmony with nature. Perhaps they had no desire to live in a way that was unnatural, as many would view the way we live now as very unnatural, disconnected from nature, instead of, being a part of nature. So perhaps they just chose to live in a more harmonious way. Perhaps these beings were much more evolved spiritually than we are now. And when we look at all the different skulls we have, the human family tree is huge. You have Homo florensis as well, and Homo habilis, and Homo naledi, and Australopithecus, and it just goes on, Erectus, and Heidelbergensis as well. So many different ones, so many different types. What's really going on here? When does one end and another begin? Perhaps it's coinciding with time periods like what we're in right now. And perhaps it is a natural mutation that comes about when our shields are down and there's a lot of cosmic rays coming in and we go through a massive extinction event like we are going now. But what emerges is new and something slightly different. And so perhaps that's the case, or perhaps there's some direct intervention as well. In a case like what we saw with the stories of the Anunnaki and Enlil, and what might be the Younger Dryas event, or the flood event of the Bible, 12,700 years ago or so. And, time will tell, but we are definitely in another very interesting time period. For change is most definitely what we have in store for us. As always, my friends, thank you for your support on Ko-Fi and Patreon. God bless, and namaste.